Hello everybody, and welcome to this episode of Building for Peace with Hannah Jewell. Today we have Emma Randall-Milne here with us to talk about natural birthing. Emma trained with the Hypnotherapy Institute for hypnotherapy birthing, and then with the Mizan therapy method to support women in their womb and menstrual cycles. She brings these things together to support a woman in her birth journey. Her business is called Nama Mama, and I'm so happy to have another female entrepreneur here working with such an important and vital topic. Welcome, Emma, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm very grateful to have this experience with you and to speak with you today.
So tell us, how did your interest in birthing began? I know we've chatted previously, and you've got several children, I've got several children, and these stories really inform the way the field of giving birth and supporting women has opened. It's changed a lot since I gave birth and you. So our stories have created the field that exists today, in a sense. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this work and why it's so important to you.
I love what you just said about our stories creating how we hold birth now, and that really resonates, and I think that's a real truth in why I looked to begin teaching hypnobirthing. When I was pregnant with my first child, it was a very much wanted and planned for pregnancy, and I knew that I wanted to start a family and to have children in my life, and becoming pregnant was a huge gift for me. And slowly this unfolding realization that I would have to give birth, and feeling completely overwhelmed by that realization. For me, the kind of language of birth for me was that it was painful, difficult, and it was a very scary prospect for me. I didn't really resonate in hospitals. I would always have issues with it if I had to go into hospitals. So I began to feel really quite scared about giving birth to my baby. A friend gave me a hypnobirthing book, and as soon as I began to read the story, I just felt myself, my fears, my worries reflected within that book, and I knew that there was something that would be able to help me to reframe what I was feeling. And so I reached out to a local hypnobirthing teacher called Layla. We were actually having a chat yesterday. She's still a good friend of mine, and she's a wonderful person. She gave us so much encouragement, so much information, and hypnobirthing really helped me to move through not just my birth but my pregnancy. I began to really enjoy my pregnancy experience more, feeling into my body, feeling comfortable that I was going to be able to give birth in a way that felt true to me as well. And so the birth of my first son was a very managed birth. I was overdue by, I think it was 12 days, and I was getting obviously a lot of pressure to have an induction. I had no idea what an induction was. Was very naive going into that experience, and was just very kind of hands-on managed. I did manage to have a vaginal birth without having medication, so using all of those positive hypnobirthing tools to do that. But I came out feeling that it almost wasn't my experience. It was how the hospital wanted me to birth. sort of this kind of conveyor belt feeling, and then in the postpartum just feeling just completely unprepared and not knowing how to care for my body, to hold what my body had been through, and a time of real disconnection for me in my early postpartum. And when I became pregnant with my daughter, I had a sense that I just didn't want to repeat the same scenario of my birth, that going into hospital was something I just didn't want to do. And so I looked to have a home birth with her. The preparation for that on its own was quite a healing journey for me, recognising and seeing the decisions that I'd made and decisions that had been made for me that I didn't want to repeat with the birth of my daughter. And when I went into labour with her, I was at home and enjoying the feeling of being at home.
Yeah, that's such a strong experience when we go into a hospital setting and we feel like the choices that we really desired deep inside weren't drawn out of us, and we were treated more like just the next person on the list, rather than a full human being working with life and death and initiation, who needs care and nurturing and really to be seen. Yeah. So how did that birth then influence the birth of your second child?
Yeah, so it had a huge influence on her birth, and I'm grateful to have had that first birth experience in a way, because the decisions that I made, I turned to home birth. I knew that I wanted to not go to hospital, to be in the safety of my own home, to bring her into the world, and my pregnancy journey with her was very healing, kind of unpicking the reasons why the decisions that were made or were made for me, why that happened, and not wanting to repeat certain things. The home birth, her home birth was amazing. It was wonderful to begin labour. You know, I was induced with Reuben, so I wasn't sure if I would recognise the beginnings of labour, but it came very gently, and that kind of bedding in feeling was wonderful, and knowing that I didn't have to go anywhere. We set up the pool, and it was just a wonderful environment for me to really relax into my birth. And I mentioned to you when we spoke that it was going so well and so easy and so gently. I don't think the midwives were really responding that I was as far along in my birth as I was, so they didn't arrive before she was born. It was just me and my husband in our living room, and suddenly she was here. But so to have had a kind of two ends of the spectrum of birth, a very managed birth, and then a completely unmanaged birth, and finding the threads of myself in both of those, and seeing the strengths in both of those stories, it really, I really knew that I wanted to pass this forward to, that it had been so powerful for me to have a voice that was saying there's another way of birthing, and to be able to continue to speak that language and that version of birth for others and for my children, for the next generation. So I felt really called to doing that, and so I did the training with the Hypnobirthing Institute in London at the Active Birth Centre at the time, which was amazing to be there in that beautiful space. It's been like an unfolding journey since then. I've just become obsessed with birth and all things womby, and a bit of a course junkie, and taking lots of different just sucking up as much knowledge as I can from these different voices and mentors. So
yeah, well, this area is just exploding as we have a lot of women dealing with stronger perimenopause and menopausal symptoms. We have women starting puberty at a younger age generally than the previous generations. And yeah, the way birth is being taught through the hospital and allopathic system still has not made the leaps and bounds that it could have. Yeah. So we see women seeking other alternatives.
Yeah.
And I know that for myself, my first child was born in a hospital. I actually had a midwife there, and it was a really good experience. But the second two were born in a birthing center, and that was so much more empowering for me. And that sense of taking charge of the moment and truly living it was transformational. Yeah. Not just in the act of giving birth, but then in how I parented.
Yes.
So birth as an initiation is something that, we need to bring that right out into the neon lights again.
Yes.
Yeah. So natural birth is important, as we've said, for the mother, but also for the child. It imprints the way that they live in the world.
Yeah.
And just, I was born through an induction. My mother was induced. She didn't know why, and then I was too early, so I had to be in an incubator. So it was one intervention after another. And I know that has affected me throughout my life, and I've had to consciously go back and rewire that sense of safety and being welcomed, of choosing my entrance into the world. Yes. It's been a huge part of my own process and healing journey. So in your work with women, this intertwining of the mother's empowerment and the child's mental and emotional health for their life and their life patterns about how they engage with the world, there's this really intricate weaving that happens. How do you address that with mothers? I know there's like the joy, and we'll get to all of that too, but this really delicate weaving of, I suppose it's the psyche of the mother and child and the heart.
Yeah, I think firstly, so I offer a ceremony, a postpartum ceremony, closing, which is just a beautiful way of pausing and creating a space to acknowledge the journey of yourself and the baby too. And I think firstly, when every time when I go into this space with a woman after her birth, whether it's very shortly after the birth or many years afterwards, to have a space held for her to give a voice to that experience, to stop, to pause and to reflect. And I find often that there is that reflection of the experience of their child as well. When birth has been, and I hear often stories of birth that are hard to witness and hard to hear. Many times trauma, feeling decisions being made for them, voices unheard, and it's kind of unpicking the layers of that. A lot of guilt for women, of decisions that have been made through their birth, but I think to honour the experience of how it unfolded, that it had to be this way for the version of themselves that they were at the point of their birth, and that we can always come into a relationship with our child and talk through that story and recognise the influence that it's had on them at that point of birth and through the early postpartum days and into their childhood.
This is fascinating about the postpartum ceremony. That's not something I experienced myself. My friends who are women who've had babies, dealing with the postpartum is just as much of a thing as dealing with the birth and the pregnancy.
Yeah.
So you're right, there are so many stories, and whether they're super joyful or they are stories where empowerment has been lost, having a way to bring that through and to reweave it so that it becomes empowering is important. So tell us about when you're working with a woman. I know that you've done hypnobirthing and then you've moved sort of through that and included the Mizan therapy into your work and opened the way that you work with women in the last few years as part of Nama Mama Your Business. So if I'm coming to you and I'm a new expectant mother and we're perhaps expectant parents, what's that journey going to look like with you? What are the key sort of touchstones or stepping points that you'd move us through in the birth process?
I feel that when I was offering hypnobirthing before, it was almost it was still this kind of outward frame, and through my kind of learning journey that I'm still on, really recognizing that birth is an inward journey, and we look to place so much. I feel that we put so much emphasis on the kind of outward space, the outward support, the outward energy, and we don't give enough space to that inward process that we go through when we're kind of stripped down to the very core of ourselves, into that really vulnerable, almost childlike place of being, where yes, we're vulnerable, we're also very curious and receptive, creative, and so I look to kind of weave this into the journey, to begin with giving a space to recognize and give voice and hold your stories, the story of your birth, the stories that you've heard of birth within your family, within your friends. What's the language of birth to you? What does it mean to you? And what are your expectations for your birth? Where do they come from? And I think in birth we need to kind of, we go to meet ourselves, and it's a place where we have to shed a lot of that past version of ourselves. And during pregnancy, I think we have a wonderful space to begin to meet ourselves with honesty, with curiosity. And so there's a lot of ways that we can do that through rituals, through self-care practices. What does it really mean to you to care for yourself? What do you need? What feels important for you? To give time to meditate, to come into yourself, by yourself and with your partner if you have one. Looking at ways that we can mark pregnancy as a rite of passage, creating a ceremony for yourself where you could bring in people that feel special to you, that you want to be part of your extended birth circle. And and I try and bring a creative element into it as well, because birth is a creative process, and if we haven't it's really interesting to go through a creative process in your pregnancy, where we question ourselves, and there's that kind of critique voice. Am I doing this right? Is this what is expected of me? Am I doing this because it feels intuitive to me, or because I think this is what I'm expected to produce? So just by creating art together, making some birth art, and being really free flowing with that, and seeing the reflections of birth in that process as well.
But I did that with my third one.
Okay.
We gathered a group of 13 women, and we made like vision boards, with collages. And usually they're about goals and things like this, but we were invited to do them about birth. And I was so surprised that I put a giant picture of a manatee in the middle with a huge umbilical cord weaving around the space, and it was completely different than how I was used to presenting myself in the world.
Yes.
It was really something to be like, wow, what if I feel like it's beautiful to be a big manatee floating in the ocean, soft, with lots of feminine support around me.
Yeah.
Because we are warriors when we go into birth too. It's a thing that takes power to give birth. But to get to that warrior moment, we have to soften and accept and shed. And I don't think I fully understood that actually until the third time of going through it.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's the next thing that you would do after looking at the birth story? Like, I know I learned different breathing techniques.
Yes, so definitely breathing techniques, breath. Our breath is our life force, and it's always with us. We always have our breath. We always have a way that we can find a thread back to our breath. And I think it's a very powerful thing, because you can use it throughout your pregnancy, and into your birth, and into your postpartum, into your mothering, your parenting journey as well. It can be that kind of anchor that's always there for you. I love the golden thread breath technique. I think that's a really beautiful, visual, creative, and I've just always amazed at how differently people interpret it as well, the different visions that they have when they take the thread and carry it off into a space. Where are you taking your thread, and what meaning does that have for you? So breathing techniques, movement. I bring in the biomechanics techniques that support physiological birth, using rebozo cloth, exploring that through your pregnancy, the different movement, and that's a really beautiful way to bring your birth partner in and help them to feel like they have a role, and in your pregnancy too, because you can use the rebozo cloth to physically relax the body and to come into partnership with each other, beginning that communication. What support do I need from you, and how does this feel for you, and beginning that communication that you're going to need in your labour,
and again in the postpartum.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it's definitely that circle.
This golden thread breath is not one that I have experienced or utilized, and I love when women share our birth stories, because our collective wisdom then supports us all together. And I have heard of women using a breath technique which may be similar, so that in the moment of birth, as the contractions are coming, that they actually are allowing themselves to go into a fully ecstatic and expanded state of consciousness through the breath. and that in that expanded state of consciousness, all the power they need is there, all the pain relief that they need is there, and the focus. But they're still really open and aware of everything in their environment, which, if we were birthing in nature, is how we would need to be. I just love that that's a possibility.
Completely. And I think, you know, like when we're bearing down and birthing and breathing our babies into this world, and I think when you're exploring the breath, you're also exploring your vocal sounds, you know, bringing the element of sound into this, and what does it feel like when I make a loud sound. You know, we make these guttural noises that come from deep within us when we're birthing, and when we haven't experienced that before, that can be a bit startling. You know, in our birth, it can almost throw us off, or maybe we want to stop making those sounds because I'm a lady and I shouldn't be making these guttural noises. But when we give space to explore that in pregnancy as well, and that's a really rich way of deepening the breath.
Then it's familiar to us. Yeah. In my first birth, I was surprised that I sounded like a snake. Because I was like,
really?
But in that moment, it's what was needed, and it was shocking to me to see myself in that way. Yeah. And you're right. There's lots of ways that could express. We might need to feel and be like a lion, a lioness. So birth and death are so related, and this is something I feel we've lost track of as a culture, and that as women we can bring back into the conversation. When you talk about something you said made me remember that when we're giving birth, we evacuate our system, and we might make noises, we'll sweat for sure, we may have tears, many emotions will come. That's why we want a support person there, or two, or three. The women do give birth on their own through all of that. For me, the intensity of that moment signifies that it's a death and life moment, and it is. And if we can take that on board and be empowered through that, that we're going to drive the ship through that death and life moment, everything changes. And what was the big realization for me, and I'd like you to comment on this, is that in that moment, I am not just pushing out a 9-pound bone and flesh being. I am actually traveling to the other dimensions, welcoming their soul and bringing that back with me as they come in and take their first breath. That first breath is the moment of the soul fully becoming present. And so that life-death is something that not only I have an opportunity to have agency with, I actually have to have agency with as the mother. I am the one responsible for bringing that soul fully into the moment in my capacity as the woman who has grown this child and whose heartbeat is with it and whose blood is with it. We're entwined. I was talking about this earlier, that interweaving of our bodies, our psyches, and our spirits. This can be a touchy topic sometimes with women who perhaps have had a different experience of birth and haven't considered it. There's a lot that then, like you said, there can be guilt, fear, shame that arises again. But I feel that we've got to start talking honestly about the gravity and empowerment that's needed in that moment, and our feelings as you're doing in the postpartum ceremonies. What else can you bring to light about this birth-death co-initiatory meeting point?
A visual that I use a lot is of the labyrinth, where I certainly see almost the birth as also a rebirth, our rebirth, the rebirth of the mother and the birth of the child coinciding together. We walk through the labyrinth and we have to take many turns along the way. We can question ourselves and we can feel vulnerable, confused, and we have to make choices. Do I continue to walk? Do I take this turn? Do I try to turn back? But if we keep walking, we keep taking the steps on that labyrinth, we find our place in the center, and at the center is where we really find ourselves. And we can take this journey through pregnancy, but this is the journey that we take through the birth, to get to the center of the labyrinth, to meet ourselves, where we must shed the previous version of ourselves, the woman that we were, to turn and meet the woman that we are becoming, the mother that we are becoming. We meet ourselves at the center, we meet our child at the center, and we know that we have to bring them earthside. We have to make the choice to begin to step out of the center, where it's safe. You know, we feel cocooned there, we feel safe there, but we still have to continue the journey, and that journey can be the remainder of our birth, of their birth, and it can be into the postpartum as well. We can walk this labyrinth many times, but there's, like you said before, there's a threshold that we must cross. It is an initiation, and we have to prepare ourselves for that, because when we just go there during birth and we haven't prepared for that, it's a very earth-shattering experience. And again, we look, instead of turning inwards, we can look outwards. Who's going to come and save me? You know, I need the guidance of the midwife now, and I certainly felt that in my the birth of my daughter, where there was nobody there. The people that I wanted to be there to support me weren't there, and they weren't coming. And in that moment, I was totally rocked, completely scared, felt very vulnerable, and yet I had to turn and carry her from the center and continue to walk, continue to breathe, continue to birth her, to bring her into the world. So there's definitely that resonance with death, you know, these huge life experiences that we go through. And I don't know if it resonates for you, but I have an understanding of my own life as its own cycle, and then the continuation within my children. You know, I've become very aware of death, that our life is that we are not on this planet for very long, but the footprints that we leave with our children, and they carry those forward, that sense of being part of this circle.
The circle of the family, the circle
Yes.
of the collective, what's moving down. And I do hope that the next generations have such a deep consciousness around birthing.
Yeah.
You know, there are stories. I used to read this children's book to my children called Knots on a Counting Rope. And it's just the story of the birth of this young Native American boy. And he's blind, and that's a part of the story, but really it's a story about his birth. And in that culture, the way it's portrayed in this story, when the child is born, right away the grandmother says, "Welcome, welcome, welcome," and sings to the baby, and really connects soul to soul, helping that movement onto this plane, this planet, really fully embodying the child. And after the grandmother, then the grandfather holds him. The grandfather may lift him up to the mountains, the stars, the moon, and say, spirits of the planet, here is this one. Please welcome him. And these are the beings here to meet you. And then give him back to the father and the mother. So there's just a really, I like that deep sense of consciousness around the welcoming, and I'm really hoping that that comes back into our collective realm.
Yes, and the lineage. I love, that the reference in the story to the lineage of our grandfathers, our grandmothers, and the stories, the births of all of our ancestors that led us to be here, and for our children to be here. And we're all connected to these circles. That's a beautiful story.
The birth work is part of a whole waking up of the womb that is happening as the sacred feminine, divine feminine is rising, as we slowly shift from an age of patriarchy, hopefully to an age of balance between masculine and feminine. Fingers crossed we get there. So this whole new consciousness around birth is also enfolded in a new consciousness around the womb. And I understand that your work with birth led you more into womb work as well, and you're doing womb therapy and work with the menstrual cycles. So how is this related for you? And what are some words of wisdom you can share around the womb in a bigger container with birth as part of that?
So I began working with the womb when I had beautiful teachings of Dr. Rocio Alacon, and she's a traditional midwife from Ecuador, and she passes on her knowledge of the traditions of her culture and her grandmothers, how they cared for the women in their community, in their villages, and with the closing ceremony that they give to a mother after she's given birth to her baby, to close the physical self, the energetic self, the spiritual self, to bring all of the outpouring energy that's been given during the pregnancy and birth, to bring that back into the woman, to revitalize her, to strengthen her for her onward journey. And this was, even though I had been through birth and pregnancy, I had never really connected with my womb, and it was the first time that I'd laid my hands onto a womb and felt the strength and the energy and the voice of the womb, the stories that we hold. We hold so much in this space, the positive, the negative, the soft and the hard, the light, the heavy. It resides here, and I think we can tend to isolate birth on its own, but it's part of our whole life experience, and the experiences that we've had through our whole lives and the expectations that we have for the rest of our lives kind of culminate in this moment of birth. To come into connection with your womb, to invite a woman to connect with her womb space, and to witness that when it's the first time that somebody is receiving that invitation and allowing that connection to happen, is again like a place where you meet yourself. You meet again those vulnerable places, those stories that have shaped you into the person that you are, into the wellness that you have or you may not experience, the way that you experience your menstrual cycle, if that's painful for you, if that holds shame for you, and where do those threads come from? There's a whole opportunity to visit yourself when you come into your womb space, and making the connection from the womb to your heart, and creating that recognition that there's a circle within us that's continuing, that's creating our life energy for us every day. And it's very powerful, and I feel deeply privileged to be able to do this work, and seeing how important it is, because unfortunately we've just lost the capacity to do that in our society. We're so busy, we're always looking to be productive, we don't rest, we don't tend to each other. I had a beautiful experience in a hammam in Marrakesh, and witnessing women bathing each other, and tenderly a daughter gently taking so much time and gentle care to wash her mother and brush her hair. And I felt a deep sense of loss, actually, that we've lost those threads in our Western society of being just raw with each other, and naked with each other, and offering space to just connect from my womb to your womb is a place where I deepen my understanding of myself as well, and I always gain a new perspective and a new teachings when I come into space with anyone in that capacity. So yeah, it's a privilege and a deep honour to do that work, and I'm so happy and grateful to Mizan, to Bushra for the work that she does, and hugely proud to be part of her community.
The womb work is so important, and I find in my own teaching of womb work, which I've been doing for years, that actually it just keeps unfolding, and a whole season of womb work will come through, and then the next season new deeper layers, and it may just expand infinitely is the feeling that I get.
Yeah, completely. It's very powerful.
Well, this has been such a beautiful conversation. I feel like I could just listen to you for hours. It's very calming to listen to you, and I really feel your deep embodiment of the sacredness of this space, along with the willingness to confront some of the issues that we face as women going into this process. Is there anything else you feel just drawn to share with us in this moment that wants to come from your heart?
Yes, I think if I could just extend the invitation to everybody who is listening to make space for yourself in your own life, to turn inwards and connect with your true self, to find your community, to find the community that supports that true version of yourself, to reach out for that it's okay. It's okay to do that. We need each other. We need community, and to carry on the circle and to do that for others, and to be part of that, and bringing our wombs together and receiving and giving the power when that happens. It's a beautiful and transformative thing, so I really hope everybody is able to experience that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something so magical. Just as we're talking, my heart is really sparking open. And this is what happens when women come together in really honest and caring ways. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank
Emma.
you. I'm grateful.
Anybody who would like to contact Emma about her work with Nama Mama for support with your birth journey, your womb healing, or your aspect of being true to yourself as a woman, the links will be in the description. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'd love to hear from you. Please write in with any comments or stories of your own. So much love.